Good morning. We're just waiting for more people to come in from the waiting room. I'm Jean Hammerman, the Executive Director of the Center for Creative Land Recycling, and we welcome you to Prepare to Succeed, a step-by-step guide to the ECRG application portal. Many of you may already be familiar with CCLR or CClear. We've been working in California for 23 years to champion the beneficial use of underutilized and environmentally impacted properties. We've trained thousands of redevelopment professionals, brought in millions of dollars in EPA grant funding, worked one-on-one with you to support your redevelopment process. This year, California has done something that no other state has done. Your legislature passed the Clean Up in Vulnerable Communities Initiative, allocating $500 million to expedite the cleanup and beneficial reuse of idle properties with priority given to disadvantaged and vulnerable communities. As a result, the Department of Toxic Substance Control, DTSC, has developed the Equitable Community Revitalization Grant Program, the ECRG program that you're going to hear about today, that will make more than $200 million available statewide over 3 years to support community assessment and cleanup. Grant awards can be up to $7 million. This is an unprecedented opportunity to address environmental injustices and to set a new path for land reuse. The intent of this webinar is to help potential applicants to best position themselves to submit strong applications. CClear was selected as ECRG's Brownfield Technical Assistance Provider, or the BTAP provider. In this role, we can help you consider which properties may qualify for the program or understand program eligibility. We can help you during the application process, and we can support you post-application. Our services are at no cost to applicants. We are recording this webinar and we'll make it available to you shortly. We'll also be chatting resources, including a link to the program guidelines, a link to sign up Genius for one-on-one sessions with us, and other materials. We're going to launch 3 quick polls just to get a sense of who's with us today. So I am launching them and I'm asking you, there are 3 different questions, and asking you to please fill them out. The first one is, how did you hear about the ECRG program? It's important for us to know how to best get in touch with you and others that could be potential applicants. The second application is, do you plan on applying for the full ECRG grant? And the third application is, have you started a pre-qualifying ECRG application? And the DTSC team, who will be following me, will share more information about the timing of these different opportunities and the application process. Okay, I'm going to end the poll. Thank you so much for responding. Majority of you heard from an email that came from DTSC or CClear. That's great. Do you plan on applying? A combination of application types received the most responses. Of those that responded, if they started, the majority have not yet started the application. So glad that you're here. And without further ado, I am happy to turn the program over to the DTSC experts who will take you through the application. Online with us today, we have Mariam Tasnif-Abbasi, who's the Brownfield Development Manager at the Office of Brownfields, and Natasha DiPietro, who's an environmental scientist, and Greg Schaefer is also on the line to support them. So just to say that after they speak, there will be questions and answers. So use the chat to put in your questions, and you can also unmute yourself during the Q&A and ask your question directly. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jean. Good morning, everyone. On behalf of DTSC and DTSC's Office of Brownfields, I want to welcome all of you to today's webinar. We are so excited to be part of this incredible opportunity for everyone in our state to take advantage of this funding, to take our land, recycle it, and bring it to higher and better purposes, to really bring some community benefits and to these underserved communities and focus on environmental justice. So today, Natasha and I are going to walk you through Fluxx. Our plan is to go through question by question. There will be some questions that we'll be skipping over fairly quickly because they don't require a lot of discussion. And there's some questions that we're going to be spending a little bit more time on where we think we might need to provide some additional explanations to all of you who either are participating in the current pre-qualifying application or plan to take advantage of the full application when it launches in January. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Natasha. She'll do a quick introduction of herself and we'll go ahead and jump in. While we're going to be talking through Fluxx, we want to kind of maximize our screen to focus on the Fluxx portal. So Natasha and I will both be going off camera, but we'll turn ourselves back on once we are taking the Q&A towards the end of the session. Natasha?
Thanks, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and we can walk through the Fluxx portal. Okay, so this is the Fluxx landing page that can be reached at dtsc.fluxx.io. And the first step that you'll want to take is to create an account if you haven't already. The way to do that is to click this button here down to create an account. Once you do that, you will open a web browser. Okay, so once you click that button, this is the page that will open and it'll ask you for basic information about your organization and yourself. What's important to note is that if multiple users are going to be contributing to an application, that a representative of the organization that will receive funding registers first. So once you enter this information, most importantly, make sure your email address is correct so we can reach you if needed. Submit your request and DTSC will approve it, and then you should have access to the portal. So once you have access, you can log in. So this is the landing page once you log into the portal. This page has information about what the portal can be used for, what type of information you can provide, and what we're going to be looking for, programs that we offer. And the way to navigate in this portal is by using this menu bar on the left side here. And so the step to starting an application is going to the Submit an Application page. Here you'll see that we have buttons for our voluntary oversight program, in addition to the ECRG program that we're here to discuss today. So you come to this page, and when you would like to start a new application, press this button and a new application will load. You'll notice that there are buttons at the bottom, and so if you cancel, no information will be saved. If you press save and continue, that will save your progress, but will not close the application. You'll continue to be able to edit it. If you press save and close, you'll exit out of edit mode. So one thing that's very important to note is that Fluxx does not auto-save, so we recommend that you save and continue often to save your progress. So the first sections of this are an overview of the program, as well as some instructions for the portal, and we recommend that you read these carefully. Next, you'll approach the first question, which is about eligibility. And the two questions have to do with entity eligibility and eligibility of your site.
And Natasha, if I can jump in real quick over here. So based on the way we designed the program, there are certain sites that we won't be able to fund through the ECRG if there's any kind of enforcement action that's going on, either with us or the water board or a local agency, NPL sites, and sites that are subject to either RCRA or the state's Chapter 6.5, which is a RCRA equivalent. What we do say is that if you have a site that falls within one of these categories, do contact either us or ECRG so that we can kind of figure out if there's other options or if there are other funding tools that we can work with you on to see if we can make some movement in your project.
So for this example, I'll just go ahead and choose a nonprofit, and you'll see that there is conditional logic built into this application, and if you choose certain answers, you may be asked for additional information. For example, if you're a nonprofit, we'd like to see proof of that, and you can use this functionality to upload your proof document, which I'll go over a little bit later. So in this case, you'll need to indicate that you are an eligible entity and that none of these conditions that Miriam was just talking about apply, or that you've already spoken to a DTSC or ECRG representative and you can continue with your application. So at this point, once you've answered these questions, you'll save and continue to register your answers to the system and be allowed to complete the application.
And so Natasha, as we're switching over to the next screen, I did want to point out that if anyone has some trouble determining whether any of these categories apply to your site, that's really why we have our staff available to answer questions, and that's just something that CClear can help out with as well.
Great. So the next section on the application is the application contacts section. And so something that's important to mention here is that the organization that will be receiving the funding should be showing here. So the application should be started by a person from that organization. However, if other people will be contributing to the application, you can add them here to give them access to your application. So we've added a couple sections here for, say, for example, a consultant or an attorney. This is a catch-all for anyone that may need to contribute to the application that isn't necessarily associated with the organization themselves. So what you'll do here is you'll add a new person. And there's a few basic pieces of information required here. First name, last name, and email address are the main pieces of information that we need to have in order for that to happen. So you'll add them and then you'll save the record. Then you'll instruct your contact to go back to our homepage and reset their password using the email address that you entered here. And they should then have access to the application after doing that.
And as Natasha scrolls back down to the contact section, I did want to take a moment to talk about the role of the grant project manager. The grant project manager is an important key contact person for us. This is the person that our staff will be working with to answer questions. They may not necessarily be the signatory, but they will be the ones that we expect to having a high level of interaction with on reporting and commitments and other updates. So I just wanted to point that out. Thanks, Natasha.
Course. And another thing I want to mention is when you do add a contact this way, please enter their email address carefully, because for security reasons, you do not have the option to edit information that you add this way. If a mistake is made, you'll need to contact us at applicationportal@dtsc.ca.gov for us to help you fix that. So just be careful when you enter this information here. Okay, next section is section 3, where we're asking the application type. So we have a community-wide assessment, we have an environmental investigation application, and we also have an environmental cleanup application. One thing that's important to note with a environmental cleanup application is that in order to apply for this type, you need to have an approved regulatory cleanup plan, or at least be close to that step.
Yes, that is a good point to bring up. And we've had a lot of questions on sort of the details, the level of approval, draft approval, out for public comment. And I think that you can't go wrong with this. Go ahead and submit your application. If we have to move you from one box to another, we can go ahead and do that on the back end. I think the bigger key is that look at the dollar figures. The ceiling for the investigation is $3 million, and the ceiling for the cleanup is $7 million. Think about the work that you're going to be doing in the 2-year time frame. And if that 2-year time frame, you think you're going to be doing $7 million worth of work, then choose that box for your cleanup, and we'll make some adjustments in our phase. So we're a little bit fluid right now, sitting in the pre-qualification stage. A lot of these things are going to be buttoned up a little bit more when we release our full application. Thanks, Natasha.
Great. So I'm going to go ahead and save and continue as a best practice. So using this button will just save my progress, won't exit out of edit mode, and will allow me to continue entering information into the application. Next section is for site information. And so depending on whether you're completing a community-wide assessment or an investigation or cleanup application, you'll need to enter between 1 and 4 sites. So for a investigation or cleanup application, you'll only want to enter 1 site because each application is for 1 site. Whereas a community-wide assessment, you'll need to enter at least 4 records for these sites right here. And you'll need to do each site within that as an individual record. So I'll go ahead and show you how that works. click on the blue button over here. Another window will pop up, and this is creating a record just for the site that can be updated into the future. So you'll choose a site name, and this is what the project will be referred to as. You'll also enter information like the address, and if you don't have an exact address, give us the closest information you can, such as city, county, and nearest cross streets of the site. We're asking for latitude, longitude, assembly district, senate district, and also a CalEnviro screen score. There's a couple others up here, but I'd like to show you a tool that we have developed to help you find your assembly district, senate district, and CalEnviro screen score. So we've got a link here. You can click OK, and it should open another page. You won't lose your progress. So this tool will help you determine that. You can enter an address. Click here. And it will show you what your Senate district, Assembly district, and CalEnviro screen score for that given address. If you need to search again, there's a button here, so you can clear the search and do it again. You also have the option to mouse around and click to gather the information that's required. So additionally, we are asking for a sitemap to be uploaded. And the way document uploads work is you'll click on this button here. You'll add the file. And then you'll start upload, and the document will be saved in the document section. So every time you upload a document that way, the component that asks for it will disappear so that you know you've met that requirement. Next section in site information is CalEnviro screen score. And so we ask you to tell us what the reported CalEnviro screen score is for your site and whether or not it's above 75%. So if you answer no, there are additional reasons why you may qualify for the application. Next in this section is about site use. So we'd like you to tell us a little bit about past site use, current site use, and also your planned site use. And additionally, we ask you to upload site photos. I'm just going to put a test record name in here and save. Okay, so since that was in a different window, we're going to scroll back down to section 4. And also I want to point out in the table of contents here, these are linked so you can use them to navigate through your application. And you'll see that the site record I just entered is here for you to edit. But I want to show you a different way to be able to edit this record as well. So we're going to save and close the application to go back to our navigation bar on the main page.
As that's saving, I just wanted to point out real quick that in the photographs of current site use, what the site looks like today, are definitely something that we're looking for. But it would also be good if you have renderings of what the site reuse is going to look like. Those would also be something that we'd be interested in. It's all about kind of telling a story and painting a picture, and photographs are really helpful for us to see exactly what the site is and what your vision is for the site's future.
Great, so now that this is loaded, you can see that the application that we have started together is available for you to view in a detail mode. So you can't edit it while you're in detail mode, but you can view the information that you've provided so far. And what I would like to show you here is the site information that we just added is also available to be viewed under the site card here. And the same thing will also apply to any budgets that you add. Basically, you can navigate through the full process of submitting an application and it being granted. You can navigate through all the stages of that through this navigation pane on the left-hand side here. So to go back to the application that we just started together, you'll go to your pending requests card right here under requests. So requests are the same as applications in this setting. Like I said, you'll be in a detail mode where you can't edit it, but in order to be able to edit it again, you just need to click the edit button in the top right-hand corner to continue editing your application. So we'll skip down to section 5. So this section asks pretty straightforward questions: why you believe your site is contaminated, what your proposed or planned reuse is for the site. And then section 6 goes into a little bit more detail with the proposed scope of the ECRG activities. We'd like to know what the planned assessment, investigation, or cleanup activities are here, what the dollar amount requested is, the total dollar amount, and who prepared a cost estimate if one is available. So in this situation, we have either yourself, an environmental consultant, or other. And we recently added a component. So if you have a detailed cost estimate that was generated, you can also upload that here.
And this is just for us to understand a little bit better what the detailed costs are. And this section goes hand in hand with the preliminary budget detail, which Natasha is going to be walking you through, that gives sort of like the higher level costs in broad categories. We're building this program and things will change from where we are now in the pre-qualifying stage to the full application when it's released. But we don't expect you to do a line by line detailed estimate in section 7. And that's why we wanted to give the opportunity that if you have a detailed cost estimate available, that is definitely something that we would like to take a look at.
Exactly. So for section 7, if you don't have that detailed cost estimate, or if this is the only way for you to communicate to us what your budget is expected to be for the 2-year time frame, what you'll do is you'll enter each line item for your proposed work as its own record here in the grantee budget section. I'll go ahead and give you an example. So say, for example, you're going to split up your tasks between reporting and field work. You'll come in and you'll give the task a name. If you have estimated start and end dates, you can go ahead and enter those as well. But you'll assign values for the 4 categories that we have listed here in your budget allocation, which are contracts, project grantee, project management, travel, and we also have a category for other. So if you'd like to put a number into the other category, we'd ask that you explain what that entails in this box here. So just as an example, I'll put some numbers in and we will save it.
While that's saving, this is Miriam again. I wanted to jump in and just say that the project grantee project management cost, that's just something that we are able to provide, I think, up to 5% of the total allocation of the grant. And this really would be used for that one key project manager that I emphasized earlier in our conversation, that person who's responsible for being available to us when we have questions, reporting, providing information. That time really would be associated with that particular person, because we want to be able to make sure that we get some focus support from the grantees as well. We've just, from the history of doing grants, realized that having a designated person in the grantee organization is something that really helps with the productivity and the effectiveness of the grant.
Great. And so I just added another record here while Miriam was describing that, so I could show you 2 components that will show up once you've entered some information into this section. So this top section will show you a total amount that's been added for each task that you add, while the section below it will break it out into columns and show you which categories you entered those values into. So something that's important is this total amount here ideally should match this requested total dollars amount in the section above. And as Miriam said, as we progress through this process, there may be changes to our application and certain sections may be shuffled around. So I just wanted to point that out. Additionally, you have the option to edit your grantee budget by using this button here, this blue button with a pen. You can delete a line item using this red button, and you can also export the values that you've already input into an Excel table by clicking this button. Please note that you can't edit what's in Fluxx using Excel. You would have to do that directly into Fluxx, but this is just an export if you'd like to look at it or share it using an Excel table. So please keep that in mind. Additionally, as I mentioned before, the budgets can also be accessed from the main navigation pane that is kind of grayed out right here. I'm not going to close it just to save time with loading. Okay, the next section is asking about regulatory oversight and whether or not the site you're applying with currently has regulatory oversight. So if you answer yes, we'd like a little bit more information about who your oversight is with. And also we'd like to see a copy of the oversight agreement that you currently have. If you say no, we ask who you'd like to be in an oversight agreement with and a couple other details. The next question is pertaining to site ownership.
Thanks, Natasha. So this is Miriam again, and this is, I think, one of the more complicated aspects of our application. I don't know if we're going to have time today to go through every single one of the iterations because we have one scenario for nonprofits, one for tribes, and I think we have 3 separate scenarios for public entities. The bottom line is that all applicants will have to affirm that they did not contribute to the contamination at the site. And that's kind of like the general point that we're trying to reach. This is tied to establishing a circular liability defense. And what we've tried to do is, rather than put the burden on you to work with counsel, maybe retain lawyers to help you work through this, ask a series of questions that may seem a little tedious and rather demanding. But what we're hoping to do is kind of carry the burden of helping the applicant establish their circular liability defense. And so the tribes have a sort of a different burden when it comes to the defense. Nonprofits have, a different set of circumstances that they have to work through. And then there's 3 different scenarios available to public entities. We can go through maybe one given our time, and maybe afterwards, maybe we can pick some additional information up on questions when we have the Q&A.
Great. So this question asking about site ownership, maybe another point you'd like to speak to is whether the fact that they do not need to own the site.
Correct.
So if you answer no to this question, you say you do not own the site, you'll have a series of questions that are similar to what Miriam was just talking about. But another thing is that if you have an access agreement to the site, we'd like to see a copy of that. So there's an option to upload that document here. However, if you do not have an access agreement to upload, we give you the opportunity to let us know how you will gain access to the site otherwise. So I'll go ahead and say yes to this so we can walk through the scenario for a nonprofit.
Let's do that. That sounds good.
Okay.
And Natasha, one of the things here is that I know we have these options of yes and no, but really the answers have to be yes here in order to provide that difference. And the basic questions that we go through is, how and when the site was purchased by the nonprofit organization. We want to have an understanding of the all appropriate inquiries or the environmental due diligence that was conducted prior to acquisition. And, there are different timelines. I think post 2005, I believe there's a more specific and prescribed documentation that's required. And prior to that, it's based on what was customary at the industry during the time that the site was purchased. So that's a little bit broader, a little bit more open. But that's where we need the text to be completed so you can explain to us what was done at the time. And that closes off with various different ways of affirming that the applicant as an owner was not directly involved in contaminating the site. And in addition to that, part of the circular liability defense is not only affirming that released to the site by the applicant, but also how the site was protected from other types of illegal dumping activity. So, for example, fence sites, just simply saying that the site was fenced, or the site had security, or the site was used as some sort of temporary use, maybe as a pocket park, for example. Those are some of the ways to answer this question, preventing any threatened releases. That could just be that maybe some environmental work was done to control the source, or the site was limited from access, and there were no additional new uses conducted on the site that kind of contributed new releases. So some of these questions, I understand, are a little bit overlapping and repetitive, but once again, we had our lawyers look very closely at the process for establishing the circle liability, and answering the same questions over and over again really get you to that point where we can kind of affirm the determination that you yourself are making, that you're not actually a polluter for the site.
Great. So that concludes the responsibility section, and there's a couple remaining sections that I just want to show. We have the document section. So generally, any documents that you upload, excluding the site documents, because those are their own record, will be housed here. So if you need to edit a record for the site, for anything with the site information, you'll need to go back into that field to edit those. But you can also upload documents this way as well. So you can add a file by clicking this blue button here, and then adding a file the same way I did before. And if you add a document this way, you have the option to tell us what type of document it is, since it's not for a specific component. So if you're including a cleanup report, a cost estimate, if you do any of that, down here in the document section, you can indicate what type of document it is using this drop down. Okay, the next section is additional information. So we give you a little bit of space to let us know if there's anything else you'd like to, any more information you'd like to provide that wasn't included in the application thus far. We'd also like to know how you heard about it. And lastly, we have a signature section where you will need to affirm that you agree to these terms. And once the full application is released and submitted between January and March, we will push the application back to you for a signature using DocuSign once you've actually submitted it.
And I don't think we're going to be requiring that for where we are right now, correct?
Right.
Okay, well, it looks like we're at the end of the Fluxx portal. I think we'll go ahead and open it up to questions and answers. I'm going to go.
One more thing.
Please go
Sorry.
ahead.
Yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and save and close this just so I can show you how to submit an application. So
Of course.
yeah, when you're in edit mode, you're not able to submit an application. Once you exit out by pushing save and close, you can review the application in detail mode and make sure that all of your answers are as complete as you'd like them to be. And once you've done that, you can go ahead and click submit here. But this button is only available in detail mode. So again, if you need to make some changes to your application, you can go back into edit mode here, change it, save and close it, and then go back to actually submit the form. And so once you submit it, you can't make any changes to the document. So please be careful before you choose that option. And that's all.
Sounds good. Thanks, Natasha. I'm going to go into the chat and start scrolling through, see if there's questions that have already popped up. The first
Miriam,
question.
hi, this is Jean. I identified 4 questions that I can read out, but I think it may be worthwhile just talking a moment about the pre-app versus the full app and the timing of each. And maybe we will also chat the graphic that shows the flow, so people are understanding the difference between the pre-app and the full application and the timing of each.
Thank you, Jean. Thank you so much for reminding me. Yes, and I think chatting that graphic that we have will be really helpful. So we are in the pre-qualifying process right now, which is that we are accepting pre-qualifying applications, which is essentially half the application. This is a program building exercise for us to understand the audience that's out there that's interested in our application and interested in receiving funding from us. And we will use that to kind of fine-tune our scoring criteria and our application. And I think the advantage to anyone who'd like to participate in this optional step is that all of your responses will be saved. So when the full application is released in January, you would have already completed a bulk of the work and have the opportunity to make some changes to update your information. We will be accepting pre-qualification applications through the 7th of December. After that, we will sort of go into a little bit of a hiatus to review all the applications. And we're planning on letting the applicants who participated in the pre-qualifying process know whether they'll be eligible to kind of participate in the full application on a rolling basis. So we won't necessarily wait until December 7th. As applications come in, we're going to start reviewing them and reaching out to the applicants. The full application is going to be soft launched in the first week of January and will be open through March. We have all of those dates on the graphic that Devin has shared with us. But a point to note is that the pre-qualifying application is an optional step. If you don't participate in this step, you still will be able to participate in the full application when it is released. I don't have the calendar in front of me. What are the actual dates open for the full application from January through March?
The full application will launch in early January and close about 8 weeks later.
That's what I thought. And the reason why I don't have exact dates is because those dates may change a little, here and there based on exactly where we are. So we've got some general dates on the graphic right now, and those will be updated when we have them.
So I noted 4 questions, and I will ask them on behalf of the individuals, but I encourage you, if you ask a question and you still have a follow-up that you'd like to ask, to unmute yourself and to ask it directly. So Maria Lara asked, are public housing authorities eligible, and what is the match requirement?
There is no match requirement. And if the public housing authority is considered to be a public entity, which I'm pretty sure it is, then they will be an eligible applicant.
And Andrea asked, if not Cal Enviro screen 75%, what types of sites are accepted?
So that's a really good question. Thank you for asking that. We will look at sites where the reuse is going to support some sort of vulnerable community or vulnerable population. So affordable housing is a good example, parks, open space, some sort of use that will serve a community need. Those applications are going to have to make a strong case in the narrative, and I would encourage those applicants to also take use of the section towards the end where more information can be provided, so we really understand how the use being proposed outside of our top highest Cal Enviro screen scores is going to be supportive of a vulnerable community.
And Rob Jacob asked, are tribal applicants required to waive sovereign immunity?
No, they are not.
And Jake asked, if Cal Enviro Screen 3.0 website provides for both a score and a percentile, is the reference to 75% or above to the score or percentile?
I believe it's to a score. Yes, it's to a score.
Right.
I'll jump in and I can answer that one. If you use our web application, it's going to actually end up giving you the exact percentile. The Cal Enviro Screen score that you generally see on OEHA's website and other locations can often be a range. So it'll say like 70 to 75%. So which is partially why we developed our web application, to let you know if you are actually at that 75% and above. So it technically is the percentile, but they are very closely related.
Thank you,
Maria
Greg.
just asked another question. Maria, do you want to unmute and ask your question?
Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Oh, thank you very much. And this is Maria Lara with City of Wasco. My question was, can a city partner with a state agency?
So Maria, state involvement is something that we need to have a discussion on, because we've stayed silent on state-owned properties because we understand that there were some surplus sites that were slated for affordable housing development to help with the housing crisis. And so that's the reason why we stayed silent on that. But we also have to be careful so that we're not using funds to fund state-owned properties. So that's where we will need to have a discussion with you more specifically, so we understand your circumstances and are able to determine whether it's going to be a fit or not.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. And Maria, you can reach out to CCLEAR or to DTSC to set up some time. We would love to discuss this with you in some detail.
Will do.
And Scott just asked a question about a school district. Would you like to unmute and ask your question, Scott?
Yeah, so Montebello Unified, Southern California, we have like 30 schools, and in a number of our areas, specifically Bell Gardens, California, those have been designated by DTSC as being an affected brownfield eligible area. And so my question is, as you were going through the explanation on the application in terms of eligibility, it was saying site eligibility, whether it's owned by the federal government, ongoing US EPA, so on and so forth. Nothing really seemed to match, or maybe I'm not understanding which one to pick with regards to school district that obviously has properties on which, children in the communities have interaction in terms of what the eligibility would be for something like that. Because when we go onto the DTSC website, it kind of shows, everything from green to red in terms of what's been affected, that the EPA and the state environmental agencies have dictated as being brownfield. I didn't know exactly how we would be classed if we are a public agency for purposes of this grant.
Okay, that's a good question. For the purposes of the grant, the school district is an applicant. What we would have to do is, take a look at your sites on a case-by-case basis and see which of those are a better fit, because new school sites, if there's new construction, then that's your reuse. School expansion, if there's some, significant expansion that's being done, that also counts as the reuse. And I think the last piece would be on that list that I talked about in the beginning, that those are sites that are ineligible because of an order. And so if you're already working with us or with the water board or with a local agency, we'll just have to determine that there's no enforcement action going on. So if there's no enforcement action, going through your portfolio of sites, trying to figure out which ones are best candidates to push forward, we definitely would like to set up a separate discussion with you and talk about that. And we can kind of help you go through your portfolio and see what we would like to pick out as the most competitive sites.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And Greg, could you put in the chat the link to your tool that gets people the information they need about the district and the Enviroscreen scores that was requested?
Yes.
Hey Ping, would you like to unmute and ask your question?
Sure. So we intended to apply for the cleanup grant, but the question is, does the cleanup means excavate the toxic substance and hold that off-site, or will the approach to cap the toxic substance qualify as a cleanup?
So the cleanup has to be approved by a regulatory oversight agency. So when you are working with a regulatory agency, you should submit a cleanup plan to them, and whatever their staff determines to be appropriate for your site, given the combination of the site conditions and the contamination, that is what would be covered under the ECRG grant.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I don't see any other questions at the moment. Does anybody else have a question? They can unmute themselves and ask it specifically. Andrea, you just had another question. Perhaps you'd like to.
Oh, yes, I just repasted it back in the chat. But for applicants intending to submit more than one application, is there a way in Fluxx, and apologies if I missed it at the top end, but to have several started at once? How does that work? If for example, we are submitting a site assessment, a community-wide assessment, and let's say a site-specific grant application.
That's a good question. So this is Natasha. I'll go ahead and take that one, and I'll show you. You can definitely have more than one application started. I'm going to share my screen in 1 second. So in order to start multiple applications, you can toggle back to your submit an application page, and you can simply push the button again to start a new application. So you can do that and have multiple applications that are not finished. Let's see if I can save this one so I can show you.
And while that's saving, Natasha, can you also enlighten us on how the organizational's information gets carried over from one application to another so they don't have to refill it?
So most of the information will need to be filled since it is site specific,
I see.
but the organization information that is kept within the system will be available. So the majority of it will need to be entered every time. So let me go back and do this again.
And then can we add different collaborators on different applications?
Yes, absolutely. So
Okay.
that's why it's very important for the organization that will be receiving the funding to start the applications so that you can tailor each application as appropriate.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. So for some reason, it's not showing up here at the moment, but if you did have multiple applications started, I think it's because I didn't fill out enough information for it to register in here. You would see them listed here as well. So I'll show you an example with the grantee budget. You can see that there's 2 different records that you can toggle between. The same thing applies to your applications that will live in the pending requests section here.
Great, thank you. And I actually had one more question. I think we passed it on the chat, but there's a section somewhere in here that says requested documents. How do we know what is required for us to upload? How do we know what is being requested, or is it just optional since it says requested?
Sure. So I think the best resource for that is probably going to be the guidelines to let you know which documents are required that we need to have. But as you enter or as you upload these documents, like for example, your eligibility, if you're a nonprofit, as you enter this, it will live in the document section down here. So you'll see any documents that you've uploaded should populate here with the exception of site documents. So those will stay within the site record.
Natasha, can you go back and share the one pager, please? So we can kind of point that out to Andrea. So Andrea, what we have is we've got a couple of different things that you can do. In the application itself, documents are called out and requested section by section. If there is a document requirement, it's going to say, you know, please upload this. But what we've done is that in our guidelines and in our one-page graphic, we actually have a list of documents that you are going to need that's a little bit broader than just what you're going to have to upload. So for example, for the, you know, you have to have your purchase paperwork handy in order to answer the question about when you took title to the site. And so Natasha is going to share her screen, and we actually have our one pager that even kind of summarizes the list of documents that you might want to put together in the gather info box so that you know kind of from a broader perspective what documents and information you need in order to get through filling in the application a little bit faster.
Okay,
But definitely refer back to our guidelines as well.
so this is a list of documents that are required to be uploaded for every application?
It's a combination. There's documents that need to be uploaded, but there's also documents that you need to have access to in order to provide information on the application. So this is a combination of both of those.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
And we will put that document in the chat so that people can access it. It's also available on the DTSC website.
Yeah, the only reason I asked is because when I went and did it, it actually makes you go through a process where you have to put in your information, something to the effect that, you know, it's not a record freely given unless you, I guess, apply for it. So I filled out that information, and then I guess I'll get a response back. Haven't got a response back yet for that PDF.
Can you ask you a question then?
Okay, Scott. This one pager should definitely be accessible. I'll look into our website permissions and see what's going on with that PDF. This should be publicly available.
Yeah, I typed in the URL that I see on the screen, and then when it does that, it comes up and it says something to the effect that, you know, you have to enter your name and then we'll review it and then we'll send it back to you. But it seems like it's right now it's in the chat, so I can
Okay. And if you just go directly to our website, if you just Google DTSC ECRG, you'll find it. We're accessing our documents differently. We're not accessing them from the web. So you'll have another URL that you'll go to. But DTSC ECRG, given that it's very specific, there's not a lot else that pops up other than that. So you should be able to find it fairly easily.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
We have a new question from Betsy. Would you like to ask your question?
Sure. So we're collaborating with the city of Monterey to hopefully do a multi-site assessment. And one of the sites is in the state Tideland Fund. I don't know exactly how this works, but I know there's some level of state involvement with this site. So what would be the process to talk about the eligibility of that particular location?
I think we just need to have a conversation with you where we can understand what it is that you're looking for, who owns what, who's responsible for the contamination. And after that conversation, we should be able to give you some guidance on how to proceed.
So we would send maybe an email with some details about the site to one of your general boxes. Okay.
Yes, you can. I think Devon's included the CClear email address. If she hasn't, she probably can right now.
I think I saw it. Yeah. Okay.
Great.
Thank
So just
you.
send an email with some information, and then someone will reach out to you, either if it's simple to just answer your question directly, or we may need to set up a conversation.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Manuel, would you like to ask your question?
Thank you. Just had a question. Can one apply for 2 grants for the same site, one for the assessment and the other for cleanup?
Now, that's an interesting question. We haven't been asked that question before. I would say it comes down to how much work you're going to be able to complete in a 2-year time frame. So if you're in investigation and you think you're going to get to an approved cleanup plan within 2 years, my recommendation would be, obviously given the dollar figure, if it's in that $3 million range, to just submit it as an investigation grant, and we can take it all through, because that's sort of where you are now. So that would be my recommendation.
So in our case, we've done some of the investigation, but we haven't gone to the point of a cleanup plan. So that's still a cost that needs to be incurred in addition to the cleanup. So that's
So we should be able to develop the cleanup plan in the investigation grant, and it depends on what your ask is. Do you have a number in your mind on what the cleanup is going to cost?
so far the estimate is about 1.2 million. But that doesn't include the actual report and getting that approved to the local agency.
Okay. Right now, I think my answer to you is go ahead and submit it as an investigation grant, given where you are. We can take you all the way through the cleanup planning process. We're still working out the process of once you've exhausted your allocation, how that additional funding is going to take place, whether it's going to be a new application or whether there's going to be some ability for us to kind of forward fund. We haven't figured that out yet, but given where you are right now and the amount of information you have, it really seems like it's the best fit for an investigation grant with the task to take you all the way through at least the approval of a cleanup plan.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi, Miriam, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Hi, so a couple of questions, and again, we're all learning. And maybe you have brought this up, and sorry I was late. What if they submit, the pre-qual and it's incomplete? What would DTSC do? Let's say they need documents, or you're looking for documents that they didn't submit.
Sure, I think we have requirements in the system that the pre-qualifying application won't be able to complete unless you've given us all the things that we're asking for. So I think the applicant will be aware that they're not able to submit the application. So it can't happen by accident, right? They can't accidentally complete an application, submit it without giving us all the pieces that we require. If the applicant cannot submit an application because they have certain documents missing, then they should reach out to us so we can have a conversation with them.
All right, great. Next question. So regulatory agencies, you may have mentioned that any regulatory agency can be, the oversight agency. There are some situations though, maybe when they're just starting an investigation and they need a phase 2 so they don't have a regulatory agency yet. So at which point will DTSC require that they have a regulatory agency engaged?
If they are submitting a application for investigation or cleanup, then they must have a regulatory agency engaged. If they are, we're trying to separate the term assessment from investigation. Investigation really is more specific and more directed. The community-wide assessments may be more suitable for early stage projects where you just need to address maybe broader environmental uncertainties to understand how it fits in reuse and what reuse is appropriate. In the community-wide assessments, we don't require regulatory involvement, but as you get into more site-specific work, then we will require it. I did want to also point out that if you happen to have a site in a community-wide assessment where, for whatever reason, you do have regulatory involvement, we will still go ahead and cover the costs for regulatory oversight for community-wide assessments, even though it's not required.
Yeah, let me just follow up on that. That's okay. I'm a nonprofit or maybe a city. There's a site, I have a willing seller. Of course, I'm a nonprofit. I don't have a lot of money, so I'd like a phase one. I don't know, but there's no oversight agency yet. Should I then apply for a community-wide, in which case I have to find 3 other sites? Or will there be conditions that if I spend more, then maybe at a certain point I would have to engage a regulatory agency? Because some nonprofits or some community groups won't have the money to do a phase 2 in order to figure out whether an agency would even actually entertain them.
Sure, that's a really good question, Ignacio. Thank you so much for bringing it up. We have a minimal threshold, right? Because just the processing time and the investment on resources to have these grants happen, we have like an $80,000 bottom, right? And so phase one is much lower than that. That won't be a good fit for the ECRG. However, we have some other programs that could fund that work. So we would encourage anyone who's interested with a very sort of small dollar figure for some help with a phase one to do some due diligence prior to acquisition, to reach out to us. Our targeted site investigation program is probably a much better fit. And we may also have some additional resources that are going to be available fairly soon to help with the funding on those smaller dollar figure projects.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
We have no additional questions at this time, so we're going to close the webinar, and we hope that all of you feel more equipped and ready to apply and know where to reach out to get support. Both DTSC and CCLEAR are here to work with you through the application process, and we're very excited to really have this unprecedented opportunity and funding through the state of California to work with you to address environmental injustices and set us on a good path for land reuse. So please be in touch with us if you have any questions.
Thank you, everyone.